Welcome to
Yo, it's Joe.
Yo, it's Joe.
Yo, it's Joe.
the Yo, It's Joe in the Jungle podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Yo, It's Joe in the Jungle podcast. I'm your host, Joe. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I respond to every comment, so feel free to ask questions or just say hello. If you're interested in some merch, check the description or go to the Yo, It's Joe YouTube homepage. We got Cleanup Crew t-shirts for the Jungle t-shirts, Joey B t-shirts, Revenge Day t-shirts, and the Yo, It's Joe Classic Bengals Heart shirt. The verse of the pod today is Matthew 11:28-30. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Okay, so today on the podcast, we'll be assessing the roster to figure out what positions we need, who we interviewed at the Combine, and who I think we should be drafting at each position. Okay, so let's get started. At quarterback, we're good at starter, clearly. If you want to find a new backup for Burrow, I would recommend drafting a young, athletic quarterback in maybe round 6 or 7. The reason you would want a nice, mobile, young QB is because you would then have a guy you can do RPOs and convert short third or fourth downs with. And it's not just a guy to keep the bench warm. Look at what the Saints did with Taysom Hill. Now, no, I'm not saying get a Swiss Army knife in the draft, but you could certainly add some athleticism and trickery at your backup position. There are 3 guys I would consider drafting. The first would be Max Duggan out of TCU at 6'1", 207 pounds. He runs a blazing 4.52 40-yard dash, has a championship pedigree, is very mobile, and a good passer. He ran for 9 touchdowns and passed for 32 more last year. He basically looks and plays like Taysom Hill, which would be perfect to add more to our offense. You could probably sign him as an undrafted free agent, and he wouldn't be a bad 7th rounder if you went that way either. The second guy would be Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA. At 6'2", 203 pounds, he runs a 4.56 40 and would give you great athleticism and passing ability. He is more accurate than Duggan, but Duggan has the advantage due to his championship pedigree. Robinson ran for 12 touchdowns and passed for 27 more last year. He would provide a solid dual-threat backup, and he would only cost a 5th or 6th round pick. Number 3 would be Malik Cunningham from Louisville. At 6 foot, 192 pounds, he runs a 4.53 40-yard dash. Cunningham would certainly be a rushing threat, no doubt about it. He ran for 1,000 yards and broke Lamar Jackson's rushing touchdown record at Louisville with a whopping 20 touchdowns in 2021. He passed for 19 touchdowns in 2021 as well. His passing stats dropped off last year, so did his rushing, but he would be serviceable and would do fine under the tutelage of Dan Pitcher. He would only cost a 6th or 7th round pick. If we went that route, it would be exciting. We'll see. The Bengals need to find their long-term backup QB. And drafting a young QB with promise is the way to do it. Besides, if a team is desperate for a promising quarterback, you could then trade them for a draft pick. All around, it would be a good investment. After doing my research on the quarterbacks in this draft, I found out they had a top 30 visit with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. So hopefully they're going the route of drafting a young prospect to put behind Burrow. On to the skill positions. In the wide receivers room, Chase is number 1, T is number 1A, and Boyd is the slot maestro. Trent Taylor is a good backup, but he is mostly a punt returner, even though I think given the chance he would be a good receiver. Then there's Trenton Irwin, who played really well when called upon and is a solid depth piece in the receiver room. Stanley Morgan, who is mostly a special teams gunner and a good one too. Then Kwame Lassiter, who was good in the preseason last year but really didn't do much else. That's all for the receiver room. We met with Antoine Green and Parker Washington at the Combine. Washington is 5'10", 204 pounds, and is a slot receiver who runs a 4.49 40-yard dash. He had 611 yards and 2 touchdowns last year for Penn State. He seems to maximize each catch, but could work to tighten up his footwork a little. He would clearly be a backup plan if Boyd left the team next year when his contract is up. Washington would cost a 4th or 5th rounder. Antoine Green is 6'2", 199 pounds, and ran a 4.47 40-yard dash. He had 798 yards and 7 touchdowns in 9 games, while averaging a whopping 18.6 yards a catch. He seems to be a nice guy for depth and a potential starting role if T left next year. He would be a 7th rounder or undrafted free agent. One guy I would love to see them draft is Bryce Ford Wheaton. He is 6'4", 221 pounds, runs a 4.38 40-yard dash, and seems to be a good contested catch kind of guy. He is just too reminiscent of DK. I can't help it, people. He had 675 yards and 7 touchdowns in 12 games last year in college. He would just be a fun pick with a lot of upside, and he would only be a 5th or 6th round guy. Another guy I would look into would be Matt Landers from Arkansas. He runs a 4.37 and is 6'4", 200 pounds. He averaged a massive 19.2 yards per reception while amassing 901 yards and 8 touchdowns in 13 games last year. He could be a solid depth piece with starter upside, and he would only cost a 6th or 7th rounder. Another receiver would be Darius Davis from TCU. He runs a 4.36 40-yard dash and is 5'8", 165 pounds. He had 531 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. He would be a burner to send up the field for long balls. There is also Trey Tucker, who would be an undrafted free agent, and Tyler Scott, who would be a 4th rounder, both from UC, if they want to go local, which wouldn't be surprising. Frankly, there are so many ways they could go with this, it will be interesting, but I would almost guarantee they draft a receiver, with Higgins, Chase, and Boyd's contracts all ending or being up for extension within the next 2 seasons. It will be exciting to see what we do here. One of the most intriguing positions for us right now is tight end. The starting tight end for now is Irv Smith Jr. We got him on a steal of a deal for only $1.7 million, though there are injury concerns with Smith playing only 8 games last year and none the year before. Hopefully he can stay healthy and put on a show for Bengals fans. The second tight end on the depth chart is Drew Sample. He has been a solid backup for 4 years now and is an excellent blocker. Devin Asiasi is the third guy on the depth chart. He has dealt with some injuries and really didn't see any action last year due to Hurst and Wilcox getting the wealth of the snaps. That's all in the tight end room, so we definitely should be drafting someone at this position. Even more signs that we will is that we interviewed 5 tight ends at the Combine. The first was Dalton Kincaid out of Utah. At 6'3", 246 pounds, he runs a 4.71 40-yard dash. He had 890 yards, good for 12.7 yards per reception, and 8 touchdowns to boot last year in college. He would be a solid first-round pick. The second guy we interviewed was Sam Laporta out of Iowa. At 6'3", 245 pounds, he runs a 4.59 40-yard dash. He had 648 yards, good for 11.2 yards a catch, and 1 touchdown last year. He is receiving a lot of George Kittle comparisons due to being out of the same school and having a similar build and speed. If Laporta is there in the second round, I would jump on it. The third guy we interviewed was Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. At 6'4", 249 pounds, he runs a 4.7 40-yard dash. He had 809 yards, good for 12.1 yards per reception, and 9 touchdowns last year in college. He would be a good pick at 28 in the first round. The fourth guy we interviewed is my personal favorite in the draft, Darnell Washington out of Georgia. At a massive 6'7", 264 pounds, he runs a nice 4.64 40-yard dash. He also had a nice one-hander on the sideline during drills at the Combine. That was pretty cool to see. He amassed 454 yards, good for a whopping 16.2 yards a catch, and 2 touchdowns last year in college. Not to mention he wasn't even the starting tight end at Georgia, so you really don't know how good he could be. I know he's projected to be a second or third rounder, but I would be ecstatic if we got him in the first. The last guy we talked to at the Combine was Josh Weil from Cincinnati. He is 6'6", 248 pounds, and runs a 4.69 40-yard dash. He had 326 yards, good for 10.2 yards of reception, and 3 touchdowns last year. He would be a good 5th or 6th rounder. Now, the guy I would look at would be Zach Kuntz from Old Dominion. At 6'7", 255 pounds, he runs a blazing 4.55 40-yard dash. He had 144 yards, good for 12 yards of reception, and 2 touchdowns in only 5 games last year. It would be a 4th or 5th rounder worth snatching if he's there. To be honest, the tight end position is shrouded in mystery. Okay, that might be a little dramatic, but I can't help but be excited to see what they do here. Another big position that's up in the air is running back. Joe Mixon is our main running back for now, but that could change after this draft. To assess Mixon's play, he was okay. Everyone is pointing out the yards per carry at 3.9, but they aren't pointing out the fact that over the course of his career, he only averages 4.1 a pop. Mixon still has it in him. We saw that in Week 14 versus the Browns, in the divisional round versus the Bills, and ultimately in Week 9 versus the Panthers, where he went absolutely off and broke the Bengals' single-game record for most total touchdowns with 5. One thing that I noticed changed significantly for Mixon was his carries last season versus the year before. Get this. He had 292 rushes for 1,205 yards in 2021. This year, he only had 814 yards, but his carries went down to only 210. That's a whopping 82 carry difference from the year before. Make of that what you will, but he didn't have near the opportunities as he did in 2021. To put that into perspective, Derrick Henry, who is the pinnacle of running backs, had 349 carries last season for 1,538 yards. That's a whole 139 more carries than Mixon. Now, no, Mixon is not Derrick Henry, but all I'm saying is superstar running backs happen usually because the running game is way better than the passing game. Thankfully, that's not our problem. In my opinion, you need to restructure Mixon's contract or let him go, which seems to be what they're going to do. At $12.7 million, it's way too much money for a running back, when you possibly could draft a guy with more speed and agility for way cheaper. Case in point, Isaiah Pacheco. Our second back is Trevion Williams, who will be taking over in Samaje Perine's role this year. He has looked pretty good when given opportunities, and I'm excited to watch him get more playing time in 2023. And finally, number 3 is Chris Evans, who seems to flash every time he gets the ball thrown to him. He just doesn't seem to get opportunities. Now, we interviewed 4 guys at the Combine. The first guy we interviewed was Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. At 6 foot, 214 pounds, he ran a 4.53 40-yard dash. He amassed 1,358 yards at 7 yards a carry. He also scored for 14 touchdowns on the ground with 320 yards receiving last year in college. He would be a second-round pick or third-rounder if you trade down, but I wouldn't draft him in the first. The second guy we talked to was Jamar Gibbs out of Alabama. At 5'9", 199 pounds, he runs a blazing 4.36 40-yard dash. He ran for 926 yards with 7 scores, averaging 6.1 yards per carry, and is also a good receiver, with 444 yards through the air last year. To be honest, I wouldn't be mad if they took him in the first round. I would also take Gibbs over Charbonnet personally. The third guy we interviewed was Cameron Peoples from Appalachian State. At 6'1", 217 pounds, he runs a 4.61 40-yard dash. He ran for 592 yards, averaging 5.9 a carry with 5 scores on the ground. He would be a 6th or 7th round pick. And the last guy we interviewed was Tavion Thomas from Utah. At 6 foot, 237 pounds, he ran a 4.74 40-yard dash. He ran for 676 yards, averaging 4.8 yards a carry with 7 touchdowns. He would also be a 6th or 7th rounder. Now, there are 3 guys I would look into drafting. The first would be Devon Kane from Texas A&M. At 5'8", 188 pounds, he runs a blazing 4.32 40-yard dash. He had 1,100 yards, averaging 5.6 yards a carry with 8 touchdowns and 196 receiving yards last year in college. He would be a second rounder, maybe a third rounder if you trade down. I would take a Kane before Charbonnet, just because of his speed, to be honest. The second guy I'd look into would be Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State. At 5'5", 179 pounds, he runs a 4.44 40-yard dash. He had 1,561 yards on the ground and averaged 5.4 yards a carry along with 9 touchdowns and 373 receiving yards last year in college. I know he is undersized at only 5'5", but he is extremely twitchy and athletic and could be a jolt of youth and energy to the running game. He would be a nice 3rd or 4th rounder. And last but not least, I would look into Israel Abanikanda out of Pitt. At 5'11", 216 pounds, he runs a 4.41 40-yard dash. He ran for 1,426 yards, averaging 5.9 yards a carry. He scored a whopping 20 touchdowns and had 146 yards through the air last year in college. He is projected for the 4th round. I would draft him in the 3rd and run with it, to be honest. Whoever the running backs are, I personally would like it if we rotated all 3 and had fresh legs on every down. But we'll see. I'm excited to find out what they do here. On to the offensive line. At center, Teddy K is clearly the guy. His backup is Trey Smith, and that isn't going to change, unless you get a guard who can also play center in the draft, which is what I found. Spencer Anderson out of Maryland is a right guard who can play center and right tackle, and he would be valuable depth. He is 6'5", 320 pounds. He allowed 4 sacks in 3 seasons at Maryland. He probably would be an undrafted free agent, and if not, he wouldn't be the worst as a 7th rounder. At guard, Alex Kappa is the right guard, cut and dried. Cordell Volson is the left guard, once again, cut and dried. The backups are Max Sharping and Jackson Carman, who in my opinion is a better tackle than guard. Trey Hill has also played backup guard. Hakeem Adeniji has also played guard, and only in my nightmares do I ever want to see that again. We didn't interview anyone at the Combine. One guy I would look at would be Cody Mauch from North Dakota State. He is 6'5", 302 pounds, and didn't give up a sack in his college career. He was also a teammate of Cordell Volson's. Now, Mauch was a tackle in college, but so was Volson, and we changed his position without an issue. Not to mention Mauch is projected to be a guard in the NFL. He would be a second-round pick. If he is there in the third, I wouldn't be mad if we take him. Another guy I would look at is Jackson Kirkland from Washington. He is 6'7", 321 pounds, and allowed 0 sacks last year in college. He would be a 5th or 6th rounder, and he would be a solid depth piece. Both guys I mentioned would give you depth at multiple places on the line. I doubt they draft a guy at this position, but I wouldn't be surprised. And finally, at the tackle spots, Orlando Brown Jr. is our left tackle. And I'm pumped about that signing because it shows you can get big-ticket free agents when you have Joe Burrow. Our backup tackles are Jonah Williams, who has struggled to stay healthy and stay consistent. He has also requested a trade due to the signing of Orlando. He might be gone after this draft for more picks, or he might be a backup if we draft a right tackle. Personally, his $12.6 million cap hit is way too much for a guy who gave up 12 sacks last year. I would trade him in a heartbeat if given the opportunity for a 3rd-round pick. Our other backups are Jackson Carman, who has played well when given the chance, Deontay Smith, who I also think could be a really good player if given the chance, then Hakeem Adeniji, who has been a starter and backup for the last 3 years. His problem is being consistent as well. Then the new guy in Cody Ford, who was Orlando's teammate at Oklahoma. Our right tackle for now is La'el Collins, who I hope gets another chance, but with the ACL and MCL tear he sustained last year, supposedly the soonest he might be back this year is Week 8. I hope he gets another chance, but if we draft a guy, I look for him to be cut, sadly. I feel bad for the guy. He got a Bengals tattoo and said he wanted to retire here. This injury has to be a nightmare for him, to be honest. A lot of speculation is going on as to who will be the right tackle until La'el comes back. Will it be Jonah Williams? Will it be Jackson Carman? Will it be Hakeem Adeniji or Deontay Smith? Really, we won't know until training camp or until we draft a guy or Jonah is traded. We interviewed 2 guys at the Combine. The first was Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. He is 6'5", 333 pounds. He allowed no sacks last year and only 8 pressures. He would be a 1st rounder, but I don't expect him to be there at 28 personally. The other guy we interviewed was Richard Garage from Florida. At 6'5", 306 pounds, he allowed only 1 sack last season. He would be a 7th round pick. The guy I would draft in a heartbeat would be DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. He is a massive 6'8", 374 pounds. He gave up no sacks and only 5 pressures all of last year. Just the thought of having 2 massive 6'8" tackles on your starting line between Jones and Brown would be awesome. He would be a 1st rounder in my opinion, and a plug-and-play right tackle for the next 4 years on a rookie contract, which is what you want if you have guys like Burrow and Chase to pay. There are also 2 guys I would look at to draft for depth at tackle. The first would be TJ Bass from Oregon. At 6'4", 317 pounds, he only gave up 1 sack last year in college. He would be a nice 7th-round depth piece, or maybe even an undrafted free agent if you get lucky. The last guy I'd consider would also be a 7th rounder or an undrafted free agent. Connor Galvin from Baylor. At 6'7", 293 pounds, he is sliding down draft boards ever since the Combine for some reason. He did give up 4 sacks starting at the left tackle spot last year, but he would be a solid depth piece if added to the roster. Ultimately, right tackle will be interesting to see what happens. I hope Collins gets a chance, but a guy like DeJuan Jones would be an awesome option. We shall see. A lot of interesting things could be happening soon at this spot. On to the defensive side of the ball. At the linebacker spots, we have Jermaine Pratt, who is linebacker 1, and Logan Wilson, who is linebacker 2. Akeem Davis-Gaither is the rotational guy. Joe Bocci is a really solid backup, and Marcus Bailey is a key special teamer. Keandre Jones is also a fine backup. To be honest, I wouldn't be shocked to see them draft a linebacker in the late rounds, though, due to Logan and Akeem's contracts both being up next season. So at the Combine, we met with Ivan Pace Jr. He's the number 1 ranked linebacker last year, according to PFF, in college. He had 262 tackles in 2 seasons for UC, including 34.5 tackles for loss and 14 sacks. So you get a bit of a rusher as well. He's only 5'10", 231 pounds, and runs a 4.5 40-yard dash. His size isn't the best, but he is a tenacious, strong, and shifty backer. I would not be mad if we snatched him in the 3rd or 4th round. Another guy I would look at would be Noah Sewell. He would be a fun pickup, and you would finally draft a Sewell so people will get off your back. I'm just kidding. But honestly, he would be a great pickup. He is 6'1", 246 pounds, and runs a 4.64 40-yard dash. He would be a kind of backer-end hybrid. He is very strong and possesses his brother's tenacity and attitude. It would be a fun pickup for the 3rd or 4th round, and he would serve as a pass rusher and backer, so you would get good value positionally. But we'll have to see. It will be interesting to see what they do here for sure. On to the defensive line. At defensive end, Trey Hendrickson is the pure pass rusher on the defense. He is top 5 at that skill, and trust me, we are extremely blessed to have him on the team, especially at the contract we have him. Sam Hubbard is a good pass rusher, but he thrives as a run defender and is a clutch player in big moments, like in the AFC Championship where he had back-to-back sacks against the Chiefs, a fumble recovery in the last AFC Championship, the wild card against the Ravens with that crazy 98-yard fumble recovery touchdown, and the list goes on. Cam Sample is a rotational guy. He is getting better every year and played pretty well in the playoffs this year. He is a solid backup and flashed some great pass rush ability this past season. The other rotational backup defensive end is Joseph Osai. He had a lot of hype behind him last year with the whole sack against the Bucs in the preseason, but sadly that's all we got to see of him last year. After a season-ending knee injury, he seemed to be a major asset coming into this past season. Now, no, he didn't turn into Micah Parsons last season, but frankly he couldn't. Between the injury slowing down his return and him already being a rotational backup, he just wasn't getting many snaps. Slowly but surely, he started getting more playing time and came more into his own throughout the year. He had his first sack against the Falcons, and it was awesome to see. He also had a clutch sack against the Chiefs in the regular season that kept them from being able to score and win the game. And he was playing really well in the AFC Championship game until the penalty at the end, which personally it wasn't as big of a deal as people were saying. It was clear who was being favored by the officiating crew. Anyways, Osai has a lot of upside, and I'm excited to see him in year 3. We also signed Terrell Basham this offseason, and it seems they might have big plans for him in the pass rush, even though he is a linebacker. We also have Jeffrey Gunter. He's a special teamer who is also teeming with potential. Now, we interviewed only one end at the Combine. That was Nolan Smith out of Georgia. He is 6'2", 238 pounds, and runs a blazing 4.39 40-yard dash. He only had 2 sacks in 8 games last year, but his athleticism shows potential to be a monster in the NFL. I would love it if we picked him at 28, but I doubt he will be available. One guy I would look at would be Carl Brooks from Bowling Green. At 6'4", 300 pounds, he had 12 sacks in 13 games last year and was also the number 1 ranked end according to PFF. At the size he is, he would be a prime candidate to switch to defensive tackle and potentially to be a potent rusher there. I would be pretty happy with him in the 3rd round. No sooner and no later. Another guy I would look at is Valami Fehoko out of San Jose State. He is 6'4", 276 pounds. He had 12 sacks in 12 games last year and proved to be a powerful rusher. I would be happy with him in the 3rd or 4th round as well. All around, we just need more pass rushing threats if we can. You can never have enough power on the defensive line. At defensive tackle, B.J. Hill is a good piece. DJ Reader is a good piece. But ever since Larry Ogunjobi left, it feels like there is a piece missing. Zach Carter has potential, but he hasn't been consistent yet. J2 Falele was a good pickup, and he had a couple good games last year, but once again, he hasn't been consistent. And Josh Tupou is a fine backup nose tackle. But we need another rotational rusher at defensive tackle to give our defensive line a jolt. Last year we had 42 sacks. This year we only had 30. Hopefully we pick someone at this position. We met with Brian Breesy from Clemson and Javon Dexter from Florida at the Combine. Breesy is 6'5", 298 pounds, and runs a 4.8 640-yard dash, which is really good for a guy his size. And he also played for Clemson, and you know how we like to look at Clemson products. He only had 3 sacks in 10 games in college last year. He shows promise, but where he shines in athleticism, he lacks in technique. He would be somewhat of a medium-risk, high-reward type of guy. It wouldn't be a terrible idea to draft him if the top options are gone at 28, but he wouldn't be my first choice if other options are there. Javon Dexter would be a pretty good pick if you could get him in the 3rd round. He basically would be Breesy, but in the 3rd round. He has 4.88 speed at 310 pounds and stands at 6'6". He had only 2 sacks in 13 games last year, but if trained properly, he could be a great rusher. He was also Zach Carter's college teammate, so you would also have some chemistry at the defensive tackle spot. All around, he could be a good pickup if drafted in the proper round. Now, my picks for this spot would be Kalijah Cansey out of Pitt. At only 6'1", 281 pounds, he runs a blazing 4.67 40-yard dash, and he had 8 sacks last year in college. In my opinion, he could be a monster or a bust. It could really go either way. Between his size and speed, you kind of have to pick him and pray. He would sure be a fun pickup in the 1st round, though. Another guy I would look at is Jonah Tavai. He would be an exciting pickup in the 4th or 5th round, but once again, size could be a problem in the NFL. He's only 6 foot, 290 pounds, but he could always be flexed to edge on some packages, and having 12 sacks in 13 games last year in college is awfully attractive, even though it was only San Diego State. You never know. He could be the second coming of Geno Atkins. Another player I would look at is Devontae Maxwell. He would be a 6th or 7th round pick. He could be a really good prospect for a rotational kind of guy. At 6'3", 296 pounds, he had 9 sacks last year in college and 14 the year before that. Now, of course, he played for Chattanooga. Not a big school, not the best competition, but if he can execute well in college, he can translate to the NFL with the right coaching. The last guy would once again be another 6th or 7th round guy. Dante Stills from West Virginia. He is 6'3", 286 pounds, and runs a 4.8 540-yard dash. He had 5 sacks last year and 8 sacks the year before. He would be a guy for loose schemes that would be able to fit in solely for his athleticism. That would be all the guys I would look into. You could pull a gem or pull nothing, but with the right coaching, you could pull a contributor, and that's all that matters. On to the defensive backfield. At safety, we kept that veteran presence/leadership in the safety room with Michael Thomas. Even though he is a specialist, he is a great locker room presence. Now, I know we lost Bates to free agency, but thankfully we already have Jesse's replacement in Daxton Hill, barring he pans out. Personally, I think we're going to be fine in this department. We might even be better. Hey, it's a possibility. People seem to be panicked that Jesse left, thinking that it's going to leave a glaring hole in the secondary. But what people aren't seeing is that Jesse hasn't played near as good as he did in 2020. One of the reasons I think Bates had such success on that squad was because our defensive line was shot at that point, and the linebackers were pretty subpar. He was really the only skilled guy to tackle anybody once the running backs got to the 2nd level. And another thing is, Bates didn't have near the postseason he did last year. He had 6 passes defense last year in the playoffs. None this year. He had 2 picks last year in the postseason. None this year. Now, yes, he had what might have been a game-saving tackle against Baltimore, but still, nothing compared to last season. Now, of course, he did play an extra game in the playoffs last year, which was the Super Bowl, but still, he wasn't as good as he was in 2020. No knocking on Jesse, but he just wasn't himself this past season. Now, we replaced Von Bell with Nick Scott. I have faith in Lou that Scott will be a sufficient replacement, and the good thing is, Scott has the right work ethic and the right mindset to thrive in our defense. I'm actually more excited to see our safeties play this year than I am nervous. And finally, to back them up, we have Tyson Anderson, who has promise but will have to come back from injury to contribute. And then we have Brandon Wilson, who is a lethal kick returner, but we haven't seen him on the field for almost 2 years. And to be honest, he might be let go of this year. I hope we give him a chance to be the kick returner he was, but I look for that to be Travion Williams or Chris Evans. Now, if we drafted a safety, assuming they would back up Daxton and Nick, I would go with Kayvon Merriweather in the 6th or 7th. He is 6 foot, 212 pounds, and ran a 4.62 40-yard dash. Not the quickest, but he had 3 picks and a forced fumble for Iowa last year in college. That's it. I wouldn't spend a high pick on a safety. The safety room is full of youth and veterans, new faces and young bloods, but I can't wait to see them play together this year. At cornerback, Chidobe Awuzie is the leader of the cleanup crew. He is CB1, no doubt about it. He was having a career year last year when he went down in Week 8 with an ACL tear. I can't wait to see the comeback this year. CB2 is Cam Taylor-Britt. Now, Cam wasn't playing very well in the first couple games, but he started getting his footing, and by Week 14 he proved to everyone why he was picked in the second round, with the game-sealing pass breakup in man coverage versus Amari Cooper. Now, Mike Hilton is our slot corner, and he seemed to make a big tackle or play every game last year. Between blowing up Mike Gesicki against the Dolphins, to destroying Derrick Henry in the backfield versus the Titans, to blitzing Josh Allen in the divisional round versus the Bills. I don't know what was more impressive. He is fun to watch, and I can't wait to see him again this year. Now, one of our backups are Jalen Davis. He is a valuable depth piece behind Mike Hilton. When Hilton went down in Week 9, Jalen Davis stepped in against the Panthers. There was really no effect, and let's be real, Hilton's shoes are not easy to fill. Now, of course, he didn't have any flashy plays or picks or big tackles, but he stepped in and seemingly went unnoticed, which is a good thing for a DB. Alan George is another depth corner. He played really well when needed. And Sidney Jones is a new face, who will be backing up Cam and Cheeto. He seems to thrive in zone, but not so much in man, so he will be an interesting guy to watch this year. Now, the Bengals met with 4 guys at the combine at this position, so you can bet they will be drafting someone here early, especially due to Cheeto and Mike's contracts being up next year. So the first guy we met with was Emmanuel Forbes. He is 6'1", only 166 pounds, and runs a 4.35 40-yard dash. His weight is a little concerning, but his performance isn't. He had 14 picks and 17 pass breakups in 3 years at Mississippi State, allowing only a 44.7 passer rating against him last year. He would be a guy to get at 28. In my opinion, he isn't going to be there at 28 in the second round. And personally, I like the idea of having a ball hawk corner. The second guy we interviewed was Clark Phillips from Utah. He's built kind of like Mike Hilton at 5'9", 184 pounds. He ran a 4.51 40-yard dash last year in college. He had 6 picks and 4 PBUs and allowed a 68.4 passer rating against him. I would imagine he would be a replacement for Hilton if we can't afford him. He would be a second or third rounder if we picked him up, and it would be a smart move if we did, honestly. The third cornerback we talked to was Kylie Ringo out of Georgia. He is 6'2", 207 pounds, runs a 4.36 40-yard dash, and allowed a 68.4 passer rating. Ringo has the physical traits to be a great cornerback, but he needs to tighten up in coverage to perform well in the league. He would be a late second rounder or third rounder. The last guy we interviewed was Garrett Williams out of Syracuse. He is 5'10", 192 pounds, and runs a 4.5 40-yard dash. In 7 games last year, he had 2 picks and allowed an 84.1 passer rating until he went down with an ACL tear that knocked him out for the rest of the year. Injuries would be a concern in my opinion. He would be a second rounder, but personally, I would go with other options. My pick would be DJ Turner, maybe in the second round. At 5'11", 178 pounds, he runs the best 40 in the draft class with a lightning-fast 4.26 40-yard dash. Turner had 1 pick last year, allowing a 68.3 passer rating against. He would be a great depth piece with starter abilities. He is also a former teammate of Daxton Hill's, so you would have a little more chemistry in the backfield as well. Turner's speed and hard-hitting ability would be a welcome addition to a backfield that was riddled with injury in 2022. And lastly, special teams. With punters, there should be a few guys who will be left over from the draft that we might take a look at for competition with Drew Chrisman, like Coach Simmons said. But personally, I would just stick with Chrisman, due to his rapport with Cal Adamitis. For the kicker position, Evan McPherson is clearly the guy. There's nothing to talk about here. At long snapper, Cal Adamitis has earned that job. Nothing to talk about here either. At punt returner, Trent Taylor is still the man. I don't expect that to change unless we draft a speedy receiver or corner to take his place, which I see being very unlikely. And finally, at kick returner, Travion Williams is the guy, unless of course Brandon Wilson can come back this year and get back to his 2020 form. It might be a competition between Brandon Wilson, Chris Evans, and Travion Williams for kick returner this season. That will be an interesting position to watch for sure. In summation, April 27th is like Christmas for NFL fans. I'm excited to see how much better our team can be after this draft. The 3 positions I would say we are guaranteed to draft would be tight ends, cornerbacks, and running backs, due to them interviewing those positions the most at the combine. I would expect 2 of the 3 of those positions to be drafted in the first 3 rounds. After that, they usually go for depth pieces. We have a history of going for running backs in round 2 and tight ends in the first, especially if we are in dire need. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a corner in the first either, to be honest. Whoever we pick, make sure to have fun and enjoy watching the draft. God bless, and Hoo Day Bengals fans. Peace be within, and peace out.